difference on this occasion was that the colonists were not just fighting against a king who was determined to use his own prerogative. They were also fighting against the parliament, which believed that it and it alone should raise taxes and control revenue. Rights, which had been won in previous century. Prerogative. The main difference on this occasion was that colonists were not just fighting against a king who was determined to use his own prerogative. They were also fighting against a parliament which believed that it and it alone should raise taxes and control revenues, rights which had been won in previous century. A scientist's evidence is thought to be reliable because it will have been tested and verified at every stage. This is not, of course, infallible, as scientists are subject to human error as much as the rest of us. A scientist's evidence is thought to be reliable because it will have been tested and verified at every stage. A scientist's evidence is thought to be reliable because it will have been tested and verified at every stage. This is not, of course, infallible, as scientists are subject to human error as much as the rest of us. The most obvious change is that 46% of the college undergraduates are now women. When I went there, it was only the third year that women had been admitted, and about 70% of students were male. The most obvious change is that 46% of the college undergraduates are now women. When I went there, the most obvious change is that 46% of the college undergraduates are now women. When I went there, it was only the third year that women had been admitted, and about 70% of students were male. As we process into the 21st century, communications are being faster and faster. Think of the millions of different media images you are bombarded with every day. It's as important now to be able to read and make sense of those images as it has been to be able to read ordinary text. It has been to be able to read. As we progress into the 21st century, communications are becoming faster and faster. Think of the millions of different media images you are bombarded with every day. It's as important now to be able to read and make sense of those images as it has been to be able to read ordinary text. In the past, wars have led to inflation and higher commodity prices. Fighting disrupts trade and prevents raw materials from being shifted from one country to another. In the Second World War Britain, a banana was the height of luxury. In the Second World War Britain, a banana was the height of luxury. The past have led to inflation. In the past, wars have led to inflation and higher commodity prices. Fighting disrupts trade and prevents raw materials from being shifted from one country to another. In Second World War Britain, a banana was the height of luxury. Globalization refers to a set of changes rather than a single change. Many of these changes are social, cultural, and political rather than pure economic, and one of the main drivers in addition to the global marketplace is the communication revolution. Globalization refers to a set of changes rather than a single change. Many of these changes are social, cultural, and political rather than purely economic. Globalization refers to a set of changes rather than a single change. Many of these changes are social, cultural, and political rather than purely economic. And one of the main drivers, in addition to the global marketplace, is the communications revolution.
An understanding of mathematics is vital for most science subjects.
Understanding mathematics is vital for most science subjects.
If we work on this together, we'll get through it quickly.
If we work on this together, we will get through it quickly.
The new law professor used to work for the World Bank.
The new law officer used to work for the World Bank.
Many environment experts are very concerned about the future of our planet.
Many of our experts are very concerned of the future of our planet.
The graph shows the percentage of people who smoke according to gender.
The graphs show that most of our people are losing their temper in the soldier.
The meeting is always on the third Wednesday of the month.
The meeting is on the third Wednesday of the month.
We can go anywhere, do anything, achieve any height.
You can go anywhere, do anything, and achieve any height.
Construction of the Empire State Building in New York was completed in 1931.
Construction of the Empire Building in New York was completed in 1931.
People under 70 have a higher quality of life than those over 70.
People under 70 have a higher quality life than the people over 70.
The area of Canada is more than 3.8 million square miles.
The area of Canada is about 3.8 million square meters. This graph shows road traffic in Great Britain. Firstly, when we look at all motor vehicles, in the first period from 1952 to 1976, we can see an increase reaching about 200. In the second period from 1984 to 2005, we can see an increase reaching about 500. This graph shows road traffic in Great Britain. According to the graph, we can see, firstly, when we look at all motor vehicles, in the first period from 1952 to 1976, we can see an increase reaching about 200. In the second period from 1984 to 2000, we can see an increase reaching about 400. Secondly, when we look at cars and taxis, we can see an increase reaching about 400 at the year 2005. So in conclusion, at the end of the period, all motor vehicles are larger than cars and taxis. Also, we can see they have a similar trend. This graph shows Figure 1 UK unemployment rate unemployment rate. According to the graph, we can see in the first period from 1971 to 1981, we can see an increase reaching about 6%. In the second period from 1985 to 1989, this graph shows the Figure 1 UK unemployment rate. According to the graph, we can see in the first period from 1971 to 1981, we can see an increase reaching about 6%. In the second period from 1985 to 1991, we can see a decrease reaching about 6%. In the third period from 1995 to 2005, we can see a decrease reaching about 4%. So in conclusion, we can see a fluctuation throughout the whole period. And after that, when we look at the year 1999, the number is 6%, and the year 1973 is 4%. This graph shows sales by quarter in the year 2004. Firstly, when we look at product X, according to the graph, the largest number can be found in quarter 1 at about 12,000, 6,000, 12,000, 6,000, 3,000. This graph shows sales by quarter in the year 2004. Firstly, when we look at product X, according to the graph, we can see the largest number can be found in quarter 1 at about 12,000, and the smallest number can be found in quarter 4. After that, when we look at product Y, we can see the largest number can be found in quarter 3, and the smallest number can be found in quarter 2. Lastly, when we look at product Z, the largest number can be found in quarter 1 and the smallest number can be found in quarter 4. So in conclusion, when we look at quarter 2, product Z is larger than product X. This graph shows life expectancy at birth Australia. According to the graph, we can see firstly when we look at male in the first period from 1995 to 2001, we can see an increase reaching about 81. In the second period from 2001 to 2005, we can see an increase. This graph shows life expectancy at birth in Australia. According to the graph, firstly when we look at males, in the first period from 1995 to 1999, we can see an increase reaching about 82. In the second period from 2001 to 2005, we can see another increase reaching about 85. Secondly, when we look at female, we can see an increase throughout the whole period reaching about 80. So in conclusion, at the end of the period, male is larger than female, and also we can see they have a similar trend. And also when we look at the year 2003, male is larger than female. This graph shows adult literacy by region. According to the graph, we can see firstly when we look at male, the largest number can be found in Latin American and the Caribbean at about 91, and the smallest number can be found in Sub-Saharan Africa at 70. Secondly, when we look at female, the second largest number. This graph shows adult literacy by region. According to the graph, we can see firstly when we look at male, the largest number can be found in Latin America and the Caribbean at about 91, and the smallest number can be found in Sub-Saharan Africa at about 70. Secondly, when we look at female, the largest number can be found in world at about 77, and the second largest one is Latin America, and also we can see Asia is 73. The smallest number is 53. So in conclusion, when we look at Arab states, male is larger than female. This graph shows economic conditions in Philippines in 2000 to 2004. According to the graph, we can see in the first period from when we look at consumer price index, in the first period from 1900 to 2000 to 2002, we can see an increase reaching about 110. In the second period from 2000. This graph shows economic conditions in Philippines from 2000 to 2004. Firstly, when we look at consumer price index, in the first period from 2000 to 2002, we can see an increase reaching about 110. In the second period from 2003 to 2004, we can see an increase reaching about 120. Secondly, when we look at GDP, we can see an increase reaching about 140 at the end of the period. So in conclusion, at the end of this period, GDP is larger than consumer price index.
Take the coffee industry. The figures are roughly these. The coffee market in the world is worth about 60 billion. The growers get about 5.5 billion. 10 years ago, the market was about 30 billion, and the growers got a third of that. What has happened? What has happened is that well-meaning people, Americans, Germans, Europeans, decided that they would help Vietnam. And so they created a coffee industry there, which is now the second biggest producer in the world. This has had serious effects on other countries like Colombia that depend on coffee exports.
This graph shows the coffee industry. In the first part of this lecture, the speaker emphasized that the coffee industry business worth 60 billion worldwide. After that, she also said what is happening in the past 30 years, because 30 years ago is only 30 billions. And in the second part of this lecture, the speaker said the countries like American and German, they decided to help Vietnam, so they built the coffee industry in Vietnam. Lastly, he said that the Colombia depend on the coffee industry a lot, so in conclusion, it talks about coffee.
You can see that the two charts each give quite a different picture of the performance of boys and girls in the two key subjects of maths and English. It shows that in English, girls consistently outperform boys over a period of 6 years, achieving scores about 10% above their male peers. There is quite a different picture when we look at the maths results, with no real difference between genders in the results. What is the explanation for these key differences? To answer this question, researchers look at biological and cognitive factors and a range of social factors. The interaction between these different components in early childhood development are seen as maintained and reinforced in the school context, and this leads to distinct gender patterns of behavior in skills with direct consequences for school performance and achievement. The argument uses this evidence to show that biological factors, such as patterns of cognitive development, are closely linked to social factors, such as learned gender categories. These cognitive skills are learned both preschool and subsequently at school, supported by the responses of teachers, creating a reinforcement of patterns.
This lecture mainly talks about different performance of boys and girls in the subject of English and maths. In the first part of this lecture, the speaker said that on English, boys perform 10% better than their peer. After that, he also said that in maths, they have no difference. In the second part of this lecture, the speaker said there is biological factors and social factors. Biological factors contains patterns of cognitive development, while social factors is learned physics gender categories. So in conclusion, this lecture talks about different performance between boys and girls.
In our survey, over 100 CEOs who had recently been through an acquisition or merger were asked which areas of their activities needed the most effort. As you can see, the most frequent response to this question was that information technology requires the most integration effort. According to 58% of those we surveyed, IT was the most time-consuming and needed the most work. This is understandable, as many of the IT issues are extremely complex, and the consequences of any change in IT can have a significant impact. The key is how quickly and effectively IT integration can be achieved, and there has to be a clear understanding of the consequences there may be of not getting it right. The two other areas requiring significant attention, sales, marketing and business development on the one hand, and financial management on the other, both were selected by 49% of the respondents.
This lecture mainly talks about which apartment in a company is more important. According to the lecture, in the first part, the speaker said they asked 100 CEOs about this question. After that, he also said the information technology department requires the most technology and the most time consuming. And also the IT problems is the most complex. In the second part of this lecture, the speaker said how effective IT departments determines how good the company is, and the consequence is very important. But sales, marketing, and other department takes up 49% of the respondent.
Which country has the third largest population in the UK?
Wales.
Camels are most likely to be found in what habitat?
Desert, dry habitat.
On a compass, which direction is the direct opposite of southwest?
Northeast.
What do most successful businesses aim to do? Make a profit, declare bankruptcy, or comply with audits?
Make a profit.
What is it called when the price of goods and services steadily increases over a period of time?
Inflation.
What mistake has the student made when trying to access the site?
Invalid password. Please try again. Wrong password. He input the wrong password.
Algebra, calculus, and trigonometry are divisions of which academic field?
Biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, sports, PE, and science, literature.
What campus building would you go to if you wanted to borrow a book or magazine?
Library.
Is a profit a loss in funds or a gain in funds?
A gain in funds.
What energy source does this light bulb need in order to function?
Electricity. For economists in the corporate sector, forecasting is usually the key function.